Liz and the Bluebird is the best piece of media I've consumed in my entire fucking life, out of any book I've read, movie I've seen, or album I've heard. And let me tell you, as someone who's let their entire being be corrupted by this shit, I'm not pussyfooting around. But because it's a spin-off movie that ties into a bigger franchise, I want to provide some context first. Sound Euphonium is a wonderful show. It's about this girl named Kumiko shedding away her apathy by playing euphonium in the school band. The story is tightly woven, nimble-footed, and resourceful in its use of characters, exploring the hurdles of getting good at your craft. The constant sacrifices and tests of perseverance, the unpredictable slopes of success and failure, the frustration of not knowing what you want to prioritize in your life, and the desperation to be the very best. Kyoto Animation, also known as KyoAni, are at the helm of the project's production, who are known for their thoughtful and lifelike approach to slice-of-life anime. Tatsuya Ishihara is the show's director, a prominent mainstay of KyoAni who has helped establish the studio's cinematic production values and twee style. Ishihara's stellar editing and visual direction instinctively cues you into what the characters are mentally dealing with. The malaise of these musicians fucks up their composure, and it's through their examination of each other and themselves that they can tinker out the band's faults and give it their all. The attention to detail in rendering instruments and musicianship both visually and sonically sells the viewer on the nicheness and appeal of band geek culture. It's clean, entertaining shit. But in my opinion at least, the narratively driven aspects of Euphonium aren't what make it a special show. Euphonium is so direct with its morals and ideals, always racing to make a point, but its truly outstanding scenes are loose and breathy, allowing the characters to inhabit each other's space and interact like real human beings. There's this character in the show named Reina, who is the dom to Kumiko's sub. While Kumiko is unassuming and initially doesn't care whether the band does well or shit, Reina cuts throats to reach the top, wailing on her trumpet as she runs up that road, that hill, that building, to slap God in the dick and take his place. She's unpredictable, manic, and awkward. She wants to fuck the music teacher. It's Reina and Kumiko's initially polar opposite levels of motivation that cause them to fall out. As they mend their relationship, their boundaries shift in tectonic harmony as they learn more and more from each other's worldviews. Ishihara presents their time together in a way that's so lifelike and special. Reina flipping her hair back to lovingly tease Kumiko after a bout of uncertain tension speaks to the chaos of communication and the fragile one-of-a-kind dynamic that two people can share. If you know KyoAni, you know that they never hold back with this shit. The streetlights twinkle in the background as she presents Kumiko with an uncharacteristic smile. Reina helps Kumiko realize her own laziness and understand the fulfillment that pursuing your own passion can provide. The way Reina tackles her problems, her hunger to be at the top, to be special, is erroneous and almost alien to Kumiko. She strikes the viewer on a similarly visceral level. The visual direction, polish, and character animation exacerbate this vitality that Reina emanates. Despite being so tiny, so vague in intent, this is the moment that reignites Kumiko and Reina's friendship. And my god, then there's this scene of them celebrating a festival from afar on a mountaintop that renders me a jittery mess every time I watch it. While the scene is somewhat rigid and calculated as it's obligated to establish the motivations of the characters, it's complemented by this unorthodox characterization that's full of flourishes and tiny twitchy mannerisms that scream an unknowable beauty. The girls express this resolute understanding for one another, through their comical jabs and giggling, through their willingness to climb this big stupid mountain, through their youthful dramatic promises, even their choice of casual clothing. Reina is wearing this sundress that swells on the summer night's wind. It's such an odd choice that fits Reina's fiery attitude while simultaneously contradicting her solemnness. It's extravagant.
わかるよ。高坂さんの気持ち。レイナ。私、特別になりたいの。他の奴らと同じになりたくない。だから私はトランペットをやってる。
You understand me. Please share this moment with me. Call me by my first name. I'll carve the world with my passion. There's a reason why the animation cut of Reina sliding her index finger down Kumiko's nose and lips has become such a memeable gif, and why watching it makes my spine slide down into the backside of my fucking drawers. People are quick to bite on the lesbo bait that Euphonium delivers in truckloads. I sure as hell did. Look at this steamy drawing I made to express my frustration with Reina and Kumiko's homoerotic suppression. We want to see these two hook up, but deep down, I think that directly displaying the emotions of the characters in an outright romantic manner, through a kiss, through a strap-on fuck, would make the connection between them less compelling. Sound Euphonium is full of these mutual idolizers of the same sex who proclaim how much they mean to each other, whether it's through helping them find their love for music, by inspiring them through their dedication and hard work, or by giving them a means of connection to the outside world. Love can be shared and expressed between two people in so many ways. The music the characters play together is often a representation of this, acting as an indirect non-verbal form of communication. an elegy of tremendous effort and passion. Euphonium explores these feelings that cannot be labelled through how the characters fight and joke and chase and simp over and scream and cry out / with one another. Maybe I'm a prude, but I don't need an eating, railing each other out group orgy scene to be sold on any of the characters' thoughts or intentions. Read between the lines of their subtle gestures, and you'll find a deeper, more unbreakable connection between Kumiko and Reina than 95% of romance protagonists. Sadly, I find that Euphonium Season 2 is significantly weaker than the first season. There's an absence of indirect ecstatic moments of connection in favour of clean, narratively functional diatribe. Because Kumiko and Reina's relationship has mostly been established by Season 1, the scenes they do share in Season 2 are limited. The show instead shoves Kumiko and Reina's milquetoast hetero love interests into the focus, which, outside of being transgressive, is pretty fucking lame. There's too many unnatural scenes of Kumiko eavesdropping in on other characters, either to learn their contrived backstories or to kick their overly precise cause and effect narratives into gear. The most directorially succulent scenes from Season 1 are recycled or repurposed in Season 2 to a much less interesting effect. Too many arcs resolve with two characters crying their eyes out in each other's arms, yearning for some sort of reaction from the audience, rather than revealing something clever, subtle, or dissonant through varied gestures and movement. Now don't get me wrong, Season 2 is still very skillfully made media. I still cried like a baby at many parts. The one animated performance sequence in the season's midpoint was wonderfully handled. But yeah, it wasn't full of that succulent goo that the first season sparingly, but purposefully, delivered on. But that brings us back to the actual topic of the video. Liz and the Bluebird is even prettier, gayer, and more masterfully directed than the peaks of Euphonium. And I kid you not, it's low-key the best thing ever made. It consists 100% of that gooey intimate shit I found so potent in the TV series, with even more perceptiveness and sensation. This movie is layer upon layer of subtle gestures and mannerisms that inform the overt yet undying sense of connection between two people. Hugs, glances and touches become the most important things in the universe. I don't even think Liz has the grandest story ever. It doesn't revolutionize anime or film in a major way. It's not even that deep. Most of its thematic weight can be understood upon your first watch. If you compare it to something like the end of Evangelion, which is chock full of guerrilla filmmaking techniques, mind-searing imagery, masterful tonal variants, on top of including difficult yet heartfelt messages that tap into the most universal struggles faced by humanity, it's hard for Liz to hold a candle to that. Once you get into live-action cinema beyond your film bro movies, you start getting exposed to crazy shit that dramatically raises your standards. Dog Starman, for example, by Stan Brakhage, is a silent epileptic seizure that cuts between random things for an hour and 30 minutes. I recently wrote an overview on Taiwanese director Tsai Ming Liang, whose mission statement is to depict sex addicts fucking inanimate objects.
I've read Love, Simon.
I'm getting more and more desensitized to simply good media. You have to be niche, you have to be brave. A creator needs to tap into my fetishes and my personal life to grab my attention. Roman Muradov, a comic artist I admire, sums up the appeal of stories beyond just how good they are. It's not about the quality of the writing, or the art, and not even about the originality of the characters and the plot. It's about the cohesion that the best stories have that the not best stories lack, regardless of the excellence of their individual qualities. Liz provides me with that cohesion, that clarity, that appeal to fetish. It feels like a warm hug that I've been starving for, both within my media desensitization and my barren loser-led real life. It's experimental yet always precise with its intent, while also managing to just be really fucking cute. Liz makes me feel like Björk on the song Headphones.
They start off a sense that haven't been touched before. These cells are virgins.
When I wrote the script for this video a few months ago, I'd only seen the movie twice. I've now watched it 7 times in less than half a year, and it still leaves my eyes wet with tears every time I watch it. It scrapes my mind's insides with feelings of both warm tenderness and searing grief. I had a hard cope and bought a US import of the Blu-ray, alongside a region-free Blu-ray player just so I can marvel at it on my TV. I skipped class to write the script. I've logged into Google Drive on my workplace's computer to write the script. It's helped me process something embarrassingly and hilariously awful that I've done recently, which I'll key you in on at the end of the review. Here's a Wikipedia-like context dump that'll help you get acquainted with what the movie's all about. While Liz and the Bluebird is a spin-off side story of Euphonium, it also works as its own standalone movie. Because it's so self-contained and tonally different to Euphonium, you can enjoy it without needing to watch the rest of the series. Kyoto Ani handed the show's directorial reins from Tatsuya Ishihara to Yamada Naoko. Yamada's been in charge of some of the best shit in the industry, such as K-On!, Tamako Market, and most recently Heike Monogatari. Liz divorces its focus from Kumiko and Reina, instead focusing on a pair of their seniors from the TV series, Mizore, a shy femcel oboist, and Nozomi, a chipper Genki girl flutist. Mizore and Nozomi's arc in Euphonium Season 2 was about their tainted best friendship. In their previous year, Mizore was devastated when Nozomi left the band without telling her. Nozomi was her closest friend and the sole reason why she decided to play oboe. Mizore believes that she's disposable to a much more energetic and sociable friend. Nozomi, though, desperately wants to rejoin the club, but is oblivious to the damage she's done to Mizore. Kumiko and friends force the girls to confront one another and work through their issues. It turns out Mizore misunderstood Nozomi. Nozomi didn't indicate her departure simply because she didn't want to get in the way of Mizore's progress as a musician. Mizore then cries in Nozomi's arms, and their friendship is mended forever, or so it seems. Enter Liz and the Bluebird, where it turns out there's much more between the two that needs resolving. We follow the pair into their third year of high school, approaching their final performance together in the band. We predominantly inhabit Mizore's perspective, exploring her complex love for Nozomi and the difficulties the two face as they try to live out their own lives. Part of what makes the movie so interesting is where it chooses to place its priorities. There's a seemingly inherent lack of stakes, with the band's main goal of reaching the national competition only serving to guide the discourse of Mizore and Nozomi's smaller narrative. I think the fact that we have to return to the pain of these characters, even after it seems like the TV show wrapped up their problems with a bow, speaks to the grueling time and effort that real-life change actually requires. It's crueler than failing an audition or losing a competition. Yamada never takes the spotlight off of who or what's actually relevant to the story. She doesn't exploit the audience's familiarity with Euphonium's characters with intrusive cameos. Kumiko has speaking lines in 2 scenes and she's not even the main focus in either of them. Reina has more screen time, only to be a cunty bully to Mizore. Fuck you, Reina. Anyway, the consideration Yamada has put into exploring Mizore and Nozomi's microcosm within a much larger, enthralling story is an admirable act of empathy. KyoAni's all about this shit, creating the most lifelike, unpretentious, subversive, and love-infused anime in the entire industry. Yamada never trivializes the emotions of her characters. She stops to smell the roses, appreciating beauty where most people aren't looking.
思春期独特のその悩みだったり、こうありたいとかこうなりたいとか、なんかそういった願いとか思いをとても美しく感じましたし。
There's bravery in asserting that these things matter, what most would call pedantic hormonal teenage bullshit. Our lives are built upon mundane struggles, intangible inadequacies, and the chaos of our emotions. Our adult lives are informed so much about when we're young. I find there's so many things which initially didn't seem to matter to me much, being the ultimate deciders of who I've become. I've shared single hugs with certain people which have both affirmed me or scarred me to this very day. People who I've only had a few conversations with who have changed my entire life. I'm as much of a sensitive, brittle snowflake as Mizore is in this movie. Milling about everything is often painful and unproductive. It's turned me into a loser, but I seek to be truthful, to be perceptive and honest in the same way KyoAni is with their work. What a flowery cunt I am. Yamada immediately asserts her ambition with Liz by scrapping the original show's design completely. She drains away the saturation, the flushed faces, and the autumny hues for something stark and anemic. We're being drawn into Mizore's dazed and isolated headspace after all, and we need a new look to reflect that. The tonal work and lighting is more solitary and flat, to accommodate the minimalistic look. The girls are wearing their summer uniforms, but the pastely washed out blue hues make the climate seem perpetually cold and dewy. Yamada said she wanted the movie to look like it was being displayed inside the world of a tinted glass bottle. She achieves this hollow effect through the use of digital processing to create an illusion of an actual camera filming the animated scenes. It gives a stronger impression of a three-dimensional space in which the director can emphasize certain focal points in the foreground and background. Yamada uses this technique to plop you right into the scene, to feel the characters' quaking motion and discomfort. Futoshi Nishio was brought on board to revamp the character designs, mirroring the style that he utilized in A Silent Voice to make the characters more proportionally balanced and scant in detail. It's entertaining to see the characters we are familiar with translated into a completely new context. Despite KyoAni applying their usual soft and realistic touch to the characters in Sound Euphonium, they're still essentially stubby anime babies. Look at their voluminous hair, huge glistening insect eyes, and rosy red cheeks that look like swollen pimples. They're still great designs with a lot of personality to them, but they definitely wouldn't have fit this film. Nishio changed them all from the ground up. Kumiko's angular, gravity-defying octopus hair from the TV series has been nerfed to a puffy little pom-pom. The thread-thin line work is impeccable, reflecting the fragility of the feelings of the characters. I love the elongated arms, legs, and necks. They give the characters this added sense of maturity and femininity. I find the smaller eyes and less pronounced facial features of the characters much more cute and approachable. The vacantness they conform to, the lack of silly anime expressions, creates a volcanic rise out of every small gesture and detail, every bat of an eyelid, turn of a heel, glisten of a retina, exhalation of breath. Yamada is praised by fans for her ability to communicate the internal emotions of her characters by limiting the audience's view to single sets of body parts. For fuck's sake, it's embarrassing that you can't go a single Yamada related video essay these days without the writer saying something about the director's use of leg shots. She doesn't need to rely on the face every time. Any part of the body works as a canvas. Yamada fixates on legs, hips, backs, hands, even the slightest corners of the heads and faces of the characters. Nozomi feels so tall, but checking Nishia's character design sheets shows that she's around average height. I think it goes to show from how many different angles we get to see the characters from. Nozomi feels so big because she's framed in many interesting ways, which I'll talk about later in the video. You need this level of variance to convey the complexity of these characters, and Yamada pulls it off.
Yay!
Yamada said she intended to create a voyeuristic experience. We're seeing these characters in their most quiet and intimate moments, as if we're inanimate objects on a shelf or table, watching from afar. Takeda Ayano, the author of the novels that Liz and Euphonium are based on, uses a perfect simile to describe the movie's visuals. Liz is about exploring Mizore's utter obsession with Nozomi. Mizore displays such a longing to be loved, a longing to be present with someone, to feel humbled and abundant. Nozomi emanates a quilt-like warmth for Mizore, fending away the isolation, the bitterness. Every nice word Nozomi tosses at her, every moment they share, every shift of her body renders Mizore helpless. She attempts to lean on Nozomi's shoulder in the clubroom, reaching for a sense of peace, just a second to breathe. When Nozomi gets close, a galaxy is born. Her pupils dilate with joy or shrink with anxious excitement. When the two of them walk up to the music room, Mizore laps up Nozomi's every footstep, every movement like a drooling dog. Nozomi's ponytail bounces back and forth like a pendulum, entrancing Mizore to move forward. When your life is as empty as hers, every little thing ripples inside of you, resounding over and over into an ordinance. Mizore is so desperate. There's a scene of Mizore receiving the light bouncing off of Nozomi's flute from opposing windows of the school. Mizore reacts as if this faintest form of connection is a lifeboat that will save her from her loneliness. When Nozomi leaves a second later, her direness is palpable. It'd be an understatement to say that, without Nozomi, Mizore would be a little bit lost. Regardless of Mizore's passion, this movie is ultimately about her and Nozomi's strained seams. Kumiko and Reina's story in the Euphonium TV series was about finding affirmation in one's gradual closeness, but Mizore and Nozomi's story in Liz is about examining disjointedness. The emotional distance, the lack of coherence between Mizore and Nozomi, is expressed through visual gesture, acute pacing, and framing. Mizore is always shot trailing behind Nozomi's bold entrance or opposite of where she stands, watching in awe from afar like a spectator, like a child at the zoo. She's the first to arrive on the dawn of a school day, waiting in fervour for the precise second Nozomi walks into the gates. When the two do share the frame, it's only to highlight how quickly Nozomi exits it, or to emphasise the void of empty space between where they stand. Yamada's use of quick cuts is especially effective at displaying Nozomi's dismissiveness, her relentless pace compared to Mizore's lovey-dovey paralysis. Nozomi offers, then immediately retracts a hug for Mizore before she can even respond in any sort of manner, leaving Mizore's face flabbergasted and her pussy dripping wet, just from the sight of Nozomi's open arms. It's a constant tortoise hare affair. The conversations the two share always seem one-sided in Nozomi's favour. Nozomi, purposefully or not, mistakes Mizore's intentions and frames her words in a different manner.
嬉しい。
She's happy to play early in the morning in the clubroom with Nozomi, to be sitting side by side with her best friend.
みぞれも嬉しい？私も嬉しくってさ。この曲、めっちゃいいよね。これが自由曲なの、すっごい嬉しい。
What a fuckwit! Distance and proximity between Mizore and Nozomi is captured in an eerily accurate way through the film's soundtrack and sound design. Yamada got this avant fuck named Kensuke Ushio to compose Liz's music, portraying Mizore and Nozomi's disjointedness as well as their sense of place to a T. Yamada and Ushio went directly to the school the movie's setting is based off of. They dragged tables and chairs on the floor, clinked test tubes and beakers together, tapped their fingers on windows, activated water fountains, and walked down the school's hallways. They then took these field recordings and mingled them with disparate prepared piano passages, and other instruments from the band's ensemble. Prepared piano involves cramming shit between the strings of the piano to create homely timbres which are almost percussive in sound. It's what Aphex Twin did on the piano tracks he recorded for his album Drux. It's why April 14th sounds as divine as it does, and the same technique is used in Liz's soundtrack to create the feeling of inhabiting the school. This approach to musical arrangement is in line with the film's voyeuristic shot compositions, positioning the viewer, or the listener in this instance, as an object in the classroom observing from afar. In terms of composition, Ushio invented a technique called decalcomania. This involved spilling ink on sheet music, folding it in Rorschach fashion, and then playing the notes in accordance to wherever the ink blots land. The decalcomania technique was meant to communicate how Mizore and Nozomi are often disparate from one another, but still fundamentally connected, stemming from the same ink blot if you will. All this shit is mad, but the production fact that impressed me the most was that certain scenes had their diegetic sound perfectly synced to their corresponding musical pieces. In fact, Mizore and Nozomi's footsteps in the opening scene of the film aren't diegetic at all. They're non-diegetic footstep samples incorporated into Ushio's own composition. They even have their own unique time signature, despite each girl's footsteps being completely out of sync. The animators had to time their frames in correlation to these samples with painstaking accuracy. It blows my mind the level of effort and wankery Yamada and her team put into this. The animation, the sound design, the music, they're all in perfect sync to convey such a rich sense of space, as well as the magic of Mizore and Nozomi's relationship. Hey, so did you notice when the audio fucked up around a minute ago? Yeah, well, that's cause I was recording with a different mic for the first portion of the video, and I actually got a new one for Christmas and it's much better than the old one. I can't be fucked replacing all the audio from the first part of the video. I'm really bad at speaking into the mic if you couldn't tell. It takes me forever to record this stuff, so you're just going to have to deal with the crappy audio. I'd like to think that the ideas in the video are more important than any sort of audio clarity or sound quality or whatnot, but that's just my laziness talking. At least you'll get better sound quality for the rest of the video. I can't be fucked re-recording anything again, so sorry. Like in Sound Euphonium, when words are futile devices for the complexity of one's feelings, the characters can find liberation through symbolic and non-verbal meaning. You're probably wondering why the title of the movie is Liz and the Bluebird, like what the fuck is a Liz? But it stems from a fictional storybook that the girls read throughout the film. The plot and characters from the storybook act as the basis of the musical piece that Mizore and Nozomi's band will perform for the national competition. The film breaks away into fantasy sequences to share the book's story, changing the film's visual style tremendously. Yamada undoes all the somber hues and dead space established in Mizore's reality, replacing it with vibrant watercolor bliss. The storybook communicates Mizore and Nozomi's internal conflicts in a bombastic and resolute manner, almost betraying the pain of their situation. It verbalizes each character's motivations in a very direct way. I think the trope of escaping reality into wondrous pornographic fantasy is one of my favorites, as I myself gouge on piles of frilly media to process my own problems. Liz is a lonely girl who's ecstatic when she's finally approached by one true friend, but this friend isn't human. She's a bird that belongs in the open sky. The story is about imprisoning the one you hold most dear. Your love for them ignores their needs and their right to be free. Liz realizes she has to let the bird go one day, in order to respect her happiness, even if it means losing her one true source of connection. Mizore's oboe solo for the performance has to communicate Liz letting go of the bird, but Mizore doesn't understand Liz's feelings. She doesn't want to let go of Nozomi, who plays the role of the bird through her flute. I imagine that most people watching this movie for the first time are critical of the storybook sequences. Some might argue they break the pace of the movie and kind of beat you over the head with a point. But the more I watch Liz, the more I appreciate the storybook. I like how long-winded its dedicated scenes are, letting you get as absorbed in the fictional world as Mizore does. They do a lot for the movie's tonal contrast. The movie never treats the correlation between the storybook and the schoolgirls as any sort of big revelation. It's obvious from the start. Again, the strength of Liz as a movie isn't because it's all that multi-layered or difficult to unpack. Its strength lies in each small decision on KyoAni's end contributing to a greater whole. Every choice feels like the right one. Every choice feels like it's a way to further humanize the characters, or to warm the viewer's heart with something cool or emotional to watch. Liz is an unbelievably tender movie, and the storybook scenes contribute to that tenderness. I think there's much more subtleness to the storybook scenes than most people realize, and it does a lot to get you immersed. Liz's loneliness is portrayed in a very quiet, unmelodramatic way. It would suck if she was framed to have a diary where she wrote how much she wanted friends or something like that, or if she got bullied in school or got dumped by some cute boyfriend, but none of that bullshit's here. There's not even any internal monologuing about her loneliness outside of the characters' narration of the story. She's a very unwhiney character. Liz lives, sleeps, and eats alone in the forest. Her only friends are animals, and they're sort of only there for food. She rocks up to work, surrounded by tons of other people in town, who she doesn't have a bond with. She doesn't have co-workers, and her manager is too old to really relate to. The movie shows the beginning of her shift at work in the morning, only to cut directly to nighttime, as if her day is too empty and uneventful to show. The most we see is her eyeing at other families, as if she's envious of their company. When the bluebird shows up, we get to see Liz do all these things again, but with much more sunshine. The bluebird herself is animated very well. KyoAni treated her like an animal getting used to a human body. She has trouble communicating outside of simple one-word sentences, and likes to jump and skip around a lot. Her big dress must have been fun to animate, to really sell the bounciness and constant mobility of the character. So yeah, Liz doesn't feel cloyingly lonely, and the bluebird is cute and childlike for a reason. In terms of presentation, I really like the use of floral imagery in the storybook scenes. Not only are the species used varied and look great, but it further sells the abundance of this world that Mizore and Nozomi don't get the privilege of fully inhabiting. There's a great shot of a single flower at the start of the movie when introducing Mizore and Nozomi, which contrasts heavily with the dense patch of flowers we see in the storybook. This establishes the sterility of Mizore's world instantly. Yet, the single flower's existence still holds a lot of weight. It represents Nozomi, Mizore's one subject of interest, and an outlier in a world of coldness. With that all said, let's get back to the conflict between our two girls. Mizore must acknowledge that Nozomi is her own person with her own problems. Nozomi feels insecurity around Mizore because she can't measure up to her as a musician. When Mizore doesn't perform the solo correctly during recital, Nozomi starts to believe that she's holding Mizore back, that she's forcing Mizore to play down at her level. She's bitter when one of the music teachers offers Mizore an application to a prestigious music school. She wants to apply there too, in order to compete with her, not necessarily because she wants to actually be a poor-ass starving musician for a living. Nozomi's cheerful facade and her tactical ignoring are defense mechanisms against Mizore's advances to get closer. Her happy tone and veneer of Genki good times cause her to be dishonest in the way she approaches Mizore. Her arms are always laced behind her back. There's always something up her sleeves. She presses her shoulders back and stands upright amidst her bitter contemplations. Yamada's positioning of the camera makes it hard to read Nozomi, often obscuring her face as she talks to Mizore. Her character design features a long strand of hair that hovers perpetually over one of her eyes, symbolizing her withdrawn, two-faced nature. Remember when I talked about how Nozomi is framed to look so tall? Well, Nozomi towers over Mizore because she's a beacon of light, someone so monumental to her. She's the brave bluebird who is light and carefree and able to touch the sky, but she can also be domineering, brazen, and inconsiderate, overpowering Mizore and leaving her in the dust. There's a great video essay I watched about Nozomi's character which compares her demeanor to that of a blowfish. Blowfish are described as cute by the characters throughout the movie. Mizore even feeds a tank of them during her retreats in the biology room. They possess a strange gravity that draws people in, but they puff up when something threatens them. They're cultural delicacies, but have a toxin stored within their bodies that will fucking kill you. Likewise, Nozomi is strong, aloof, sweet, and at the center of Mizore's universe, but there's no denying that she's malicious, and hyper-defensive. She's a manic pixie dream girl, Lamau. As much as I've painted Nozomi as a dismissive person, you can't blame her too much. She's trying her best to conquer her fear and jealousy. She's only human. I've actually been babying Mizore a lot this entire time. It's not exactly like she's being an approachable friend either. We see her actively avoid the communal chattering between Nozomi and the other girls in the classroom, choosing to instead sit by herself in the biology room every day at lunchtime. She doesn't know how to communicate her feelings, her desire to be closer to Nozomi. Lately it seems like introversion has been propped up to be some sort of fashionable trait like, yeah, I have no fucking social skills, but no, this kind of shit ruins your life and you really get to see it through Mizore's character. Mizore barely acknowledges the presence of her peers. Her eyes always stare off into dead space. The majority of her replies are concise and permissive stutters. Mizore's hunched, forward-leaning posture is strategic, allowing her to lean just an increment closer into Nozomi's business. Mizore instinctively tugs on her hair like a security blanket. It's an easy visual through-line to spot that communicates when she feels nervous or insecure. However, Mizore actually has this panicky grip reflex towards all sorts of objects, whether that be her skirt or the string in her hands. It's an awesome detail I didn't notice until after a few watches. It's a very natural way to portray someone's habitual movements and how a single gesture can vary across different contexts. The same can be said for Nozomi's gestures. She taps her feet a lot when standing up, but she's pretty restless with her legs all the time. But back to Mizore's insecurities. She bears all the desperation, all the confusion, all the strife under her cold, asocial shell. She wades in her rumination, her trepidation. Will I burden Nozomi? Does Nozomi care about me at all? Atsumi Tanizaki, Mizore's voice actress, had this to say about her portrayal of the character. The director told me that Mizore feels like it's the last chance to be with Nozomi every time she meets her. Mizore's inability to speak up, this internal meandering, is exactly what's holding her back. She's a voyeur of Nozomi. She's a simp, not an equal or a friend. Mizore's precariousness makes her attempts to connect just as sincere and insufficient as Nozomi's. She's an incredible oboist, but she could care less about competitions or fancy universities. Her apathy is cruel. While everyone's attention is fixed on Yuko as she gives a speech about the national competition, Mizore is staring blankly away, fidgeting with her hair, giving empty yeses and ahas in response. Her only reason for playing is to be by Nozomi's side. She dreads the final day of their third year in high school. She only wants to apply to the music school if Nozomi is applying too. All of Mizore's past hurt, present enjoyment, and future prospects stem from her codependence on Nozomi. It's not healthy. Mizore and Nozomi's relationship is important and undeniably special, but something needs to change if they want things to work. The school setting is a figurative cage, which mirrors Mizore and Nozomi's immobilization, and the roles they play as Liz and the Bluebird. Something that initially confused me about this movie is how we don't get to visit Mizore's home at all. It's a staple in KyoAni shows to visit the bedrooms of the main characters as a moment of characterization. Mayaka is a hoarder. I wanted to see Mizore's stuffed animals, or know whether or not her room was a desolate shit-stained pigsty like fellow asocial anime associate Rei Ayanami. The little props, toys, and posters within the characters' rooms help extend what we know about them as people, but we don't get to see any of that here. On top of that, we don't get to see any of the characters go anywhere outside the school at all. There's mentions of Mizore and Nozomi going to festivals and pool parties, but the film purposefully never shows them. This is one of the main criticisms I had with the movie at first, because I felt the home and outdoor scenes would be ample opportunities to give the character interactions more breathing room. But that's exactly the thing. Yamada doesn't want to give us that. She wants us to feel claustrophobic. Mizore is trapped, Nozomi is trapped. They enter the school at the start of the movie and are stuck there for its entirety. There's really nothing in Mizore's universe that exists outside of Nozomi. It makes the opportunities for Mizore and Nozomi to explore each other's company feel more restricted and hollow, while also making the mundane nudges and encounters they have more desperate and explosive in sensation. This in tandem with Yamada's frigid aesthetic and shot composition only emphasise the cage motif further. We see birds flying in the sky from outside the school's windows, not bound by ceilings or walls. Kumiko and Reina's practice spot outside the school is repurposed very cleverly in the movie. While in the show it communicated Kumiko and Reina's limitless ambition, their physical positioning outside of the school's cage in this movie draws a clear contrast between the dynamics of the two groups of girls. You have the free-range eggs and the caged ones. Ririka, a ditzy underclassman and fellow oboist, shows Mizore's potential to develop a more healthy relationship with Nozomi. I feared that Ririka's character would fall under the mean-spirited gossipy girl archetype, whose doting of Mizore would only emphasize her feebleness and social incompetence. But to both mine and Mizore's surprise, Ririka's approaches are genuine, becoming a true friend throughout the film. Sure, Ririka and her cronies coin Mizore with the nickname Ice Queen, but her approaches are patient and free of disdain. Mizore is actually positioned as the arsehole here, quickly shooting down Ririka's invites to outings and parties. When Ririka breaks down in tears in front of Mizore, telling her that she failed the band's audition to play in the competition, to play alongside the senior she cares so much about, Mizore has to make an active decision to reach her halfway. I love this scene. Ririka's characterization as the playful and carefree counterpart to Mizore crumbles in an instant. Her voice actress does this pitchy, dry-throated wail that just overflows in a state of confusion and agony. Ririka has her own kicking theme in the movie titled Double Lead Girls. Many movies resort to using a wacky song for comedy hijinks scenes, and it's usually really tacky and lazy. It's as emotionally manipulative as using a laugh track, or playing sappy piano music when a character dies, but despite Ririka's theme seeming to follow this route, it's actually used very cleverly. Firstly, the track follows the same strict compositional rules Ushio and Yamada laid out with the rest of the soundtrack, using only oboe, glockenspiel, and ambience. Secondly, the track has 6 totally unique variations that are used in corresponding scenes in the movie, which makes its usage much more dynamic. The movie takes advantage of the tonal variation and arrangements between the 6 pieces. Double Lead Girls 5 is used when Ririka breaks down crying, which mimics the song's main melody before completely switching to a downtrodden prepared piano arrangement. The first 4 versions of Double Lead Girls condition you to believe that fun, happy Ririka times are coming, before catching you off guard with Ririka's turmoil. Once Ririka and Mizore meet halfway, Double Lead Girls 6 plays, featuring a much fuller version of the arrangement with 2 oboes playing side by side. Ririka proves that Mizore is capable of opening herself up to others, that she can overcome her shyness and her preoccupations with a bit of a nudge. She starts making oboe reads for Ririka and lets her play by her side. But this only draws attention to how our relationship with Nozomi does not function under the same level of transparency. causing their distance to grow larger. When Mizore asks Nozomi if she can invite Ririka to the seniors' pool gath, we see Nozomi's face drop with visible shock, before the frame is wiped by a passing by classmate. Nozomi has already plastered a fake smile onto her face. In a later scene, Nozomi notices the sound of Mizore and Ririka playing oboe together from the floor above, tilting her head up with a look of trepidation before laughing it off and returning to her friends. Mizore and Nozomi used to be able to cheer each other on from opposite sides of the noisy music room, without the need for words. But watching Nozomi sever this transmission, watching her reject Mizore's plea for a hug, is a pain comparable to getting paper cut in the eyeball. This is peak lesbian jealousy. Yuko and Natsuki are great in this movie, and it's fun seeing them tease each other as they normally do. While the show would use their antics to create bouncy comedic moments, they're not allowed to do that in Liz because it would completely break the tone of the movie. Yamada still lets their characterization shine through though. It's interesting to see their dynamic play out in a much more subdued environment. Like Kumiko and Reina, they're an intimate duo who help illustrate Mizore and Nozomi's disjointedness. Even though Yuko and Natsuki are constantly catfighting, they're comfortable being physically close to one another. Teasing is often a form of intimacy that is expressed among many friendships, showing a certain playfulness and enjoyment that two people can have in one another's company. You wouldn't call a complete stranger a poo-poo bumhead, but I bet you call your best friend that at least 5 times a day. Teasing also shows a mutual understanding of each other's boundaries. You know how to dig into the other person for a good laugh, but not so much so that you hurt them. Yuko and Natsuki are close enough to have this mutual understanding. They react to Mizore and Nozomi's falling out in a perceptive and supportive way. They're good lads, yet they react in ways which feel true to their character. Yuko is much more protective of Mizore. She has to be more active in the situation because she's not only Mizore's close friend, but the new president of the band. She also does not see the danger in Mizore's possessiveness of Nozomi. This runs parallel with Yuko's own personality and biases. She herself was a massive simp for Kaori-senpai in the Euphonium TV series, so she'd be much more susceptible to empathizing with Mizore. Meanwhile, Natsuki shows a much more level-headed approach, which is more in line with her chill attitude. She believes that it's important to set boundaries in place, and that Mizore shouldn't get into Nozomi's business all the time. Yuko and Natsuki's advice comes from a place of kindness, but it's up to Mizore and Nozomi to make things work. Before I get around to the film's 2 big back-to-back whammy scenes, here's a list of some of my favourite small gestures, voice acting moments, and points of characterization that I haven't discussed already, or at least in that much detail. Futoshi Nishiya's fluid, bubbly animation direction combined with Yamada's dynamic framing of the body is truly impeccable. In a visual medium, a good character is not only portrayed through how well they are written and designed, but also through how well they act and move. The screenwriter shouldn't be working alone. It's a collaborative effort between them, the animators, and voice crew to pull off something special. So many anime in particular fail in this department, yet KyoAni brings so much out of their characters who, on the surface, are just homogenous high school teens. The film has so many small animated highlights, and they're my favourite part of the film, yet I never feel oversaturated by them. I could see a more artsy and fetishy movie take the concept of Liz and have so many intimate moments to the point where it seems unnecessary or unrealistic. It could make for a cool visual spectacle, and I'm always a big fan of those, but I prefer Liz's approach, which is more grounded. This movie is about illustrating how monumentally different Mizore and Nozomi are from one another, using the smallest visual cues to communicate the miracle of their friendship. It's also about musicianship, high school life, and a storybook world. So that's all we need. Each of these subjects is carefully studied and executed, and nothing extraneous bogs down the experience. Yamada is also careful to space out Mizore and Nozomi scenes to make sure each one feels special and unique. It captures Mizore's deprivation, and how she needs to savor each and every one of these small moments. It's a perfect balance of presence and absence, in a movie all about dualities and contrast. It's so gobsmacking beautiful. Anyway, here are some of the highlights. Mizore's glittering eyes help portray excitement in a way that fits her character. While Nozomi constantly displays this cheeriness through her body language, we are attuned to Mizore's joy through something as small as the way her eyes light up. When Mizore attempts to lean on Nozomi's shoulder, we get a great detailed shot of Mizore's messy hair swaying about, full of volume and gravity. Her face morphs from trepidation into pleasure, as if about to jump into a pool. It's so nice. It's really funny when Ririka fidgets her body around in frustration when Nozomi attempts to give her advice that falls flat. It's even funnier when Ririka gives Nozomi an egg as a thank you gift for her help. Ririka is a character so texturally characterized despite not appearing for nearly half of the film. Yamada is willing to amputate a character as well realized as Ririka halfway into Liz to stay committed to Mizore and Nozomi's story. French toaster is great. Nozomi and the girls putting their snacks on a hanky to share is great. More good parts include Reina shuffling her legs when wanting to confront Mizore, only having the bravery to speak once Yuko prompts her to. She really is a dumb, awkward little baby. Compared to most anime or even the Euphonium TV series, the voice crew include much more ahs and ums in their speech to sell the awkwardness and realism of the characters. In the movie's opening scene, I like how we get to see the differences in how the girls drop their shoes. Nozomi carelessly lets her shoes drop to the floor, whereas Mizore is more sensible. To touch on the devastating hug rejection scene again, the way Mizore's open, strained arms box Nozomi in the shot is very obtuse. We feel Nozomi's discomfort and Mizore's desperate possessiveness. The lingering back and forth cuts of the two girls as they just stand there makes things even more awful. The scenes with the librarian are very useful in characterizing the differences between Mizore and Nozomi. Nozomi is carefree towards the library's rigid rules, shrugging off Mizore's late return of the storybook. Mizore also doesn't care, but it's because she's too permissive to fight back. She gets steamrolled for the late return without saying a word. It helps that the librarian herself is a fun character, playing off of the girls with her deadpan authoritarian yapping. We see the two girls bonding after the library scene, which further sells that unorthodox but genuine relationship. Oh my god, this scene where Mizore falls asleep and imagines Nozomi running is amazing. The fact that Nozomi's back is turned to the frame captures the intensity of Mizore's admiration towards her friend. The watercolor work is divine, and Nozomi bowing up and down mirrors the reflective light of her flute that is hovering over Mizore's closed eyelids. Each step taken by Nozomi is synced to Uchio's raspy piano thuds, and it's as if she's really flying. The last thing I'll talk about here is this special model that Nishia had for the animators, on how Mizore should look when she closes her eyes. She pulls this frumpy face as if she's too feeble to fully handle her own emotions. This expression is used a lot when Mizore gets excited by Nozomi, and it's so fucking adorable. With that all said and done, let's get to the big boy scenes. Mizore finally inhabits her role as Liz, understanding that she must let Nozomi be free. We cut to the film's last storybook scene. Liz's sad, tender smile when saying goodbye to the bluebird is really powerful, which shows how strong her resolve is in doing what's best for the both of them. On a whole, the movie barely resorts to portraying tears or crying to make us feel for the characters. Mizore cries a bunch in the TV series, but she doesn't shed a single tear in Liz despite all her pain, which is very impressive. It shows more thoughtfulness on KyoAni's end on how to portray sadness in unique ways. With that being said, the bluebird cries a bunch in this scene, but it's not cloying. She's just a dumb kid after all. What gets me more emotional here is Liz's strength. Mizore's expression of freeing Nozomi from her cage occurs not during some sort of grand display at the national competition, but during rehearsal in the band's clubroom. As with everything in this movie, this moment is small, it's off the beaten path, but it's intimate, it's delicate and sensual. All of the film's threads of communication, the storybook, the music, the wordless gestures, reach an intersection of clarity through Mizore's oboe solo. Taki-sensei, who acted as Euphonium's subdued Terence Fletcher figure, is not given much weight in this scene. Usually his harsh feedback is used to measure how accomplished or unskilled a certain performer is in the band, but his presence here is unimportant. Nozomi fucks up pretty badly and the rest of the band are still unpolished, but we don't need Taki-sensei to say so. The musical conversation shared between Mizore and Nozomi is much more important than how well they play. The instruments look amazing in this sequence. Hiroyuki Takahashi was in charge of designing Mizore and Nozomi's oboe and flute. There's a video which you can watch of him doing this, and the precision he takes to proportion everything right is nail-biting. The instruments look so sturdy and lifelike. The animation direction Nishia provides makes the scene even more mouth-watering. Look at the firm elasticity of the harp's strings or the warbling skin of the drum. Yamada's field of depth digital processing technique is used to navigate between different musicians as they start and stop playing. It's also used to obscure and hide the faces of the side characters when their instruments are shown on screen. Mizore and Nozomi always remain at the center of attention. The instruments are shot very tightly together and hoard the entirety of the frame. It creates a sense of tension that suffocates our leads. The performance scene gets me more riled up than 90% of action scenes I've seen in movies. As I said before, the storybook sequences conclude prior to the soloing scene and never show up again, as if to suggest that Mizore and Liz's surrender is occurring simultaneously. Fiction bleeds right into reality. Orchestral pieces of music in the movie are reserved for the storybook, whereas Uchio's ambient pieces are reserved for the IRL scenes. When Liz says goodbye to the bluebird in the storybook, a cold ambient track plays. When Mizore performs in the clubroom, an orchestral piece is being used IRL for the first time. Simple but effective choice. It's great that the storybook scenes utilize variations of the orchestral Liz and the bluebird theme, but never include the version which incorporates Mizore's solo, giving off the idea that the piece is incomplete, that Liz is still too afraid to let the bluebird go. Once Mizore plays the solo, the piece is complete, and the bluebird flies away. We get cuts to a bird flapping away, rendered using the same decalcomania technique as the sheet music compositions. The painted wings are identically mirrored across a folded point on the animation cell to create the image of a bird. Genius shit. In terms of musical and auditory communication, This is another example of a scene where the piece was recorded before animating the actions afterwards. Yamada coordinated with a live oboist and flutist to play Mizore and Nozomi's performances, before precisely animating on top. The oboist and flutist listened to me so attentively, they really managed to get on board emotionally and did a great deal of acting. You can hear intermittent breaths between the two musicians and the acoustic hums of their instruments. Mizore soars with a confidence unseen throughout the entire movie, spilling her guts out in the piece all while retaining a straight face. I can barely comment on the piece itself. Mizore's solo is intricate and articulate, and the swoon of the oboe and the flute playing together just kills me. Nozomi's reaction says it all. Her flute cuts out abruptly mid-phrase. Yamada gives her thoughts here. There's a moment where Nozomi doesn't want to lose, but just can't fight back. The live musicians had really broken down and understood this moment, so the expression in the music was so good. Tears trickle down onto Nozomi's lap. Mizore has breached right into her ironclad facade. Even then, we never see tears directly in Nozomi's eyes, cutting away from her face as they drop, gone from her eyes when we cut back up. It goes to show how stubborn Nozomi's fortitude is. But Mizore communicates her convictions bare, transcending the need for words. The camera flies through the window out of the clubroom, following the decalcomania rendered bird as it departs the school grounds. The music stops, everybody's jaws drop open, one girl even starts crying. My tears already started flowing when Nozomi's did. Practice ends and the rest of the band members pigpile Mizore with compliments, but the person Mizore wants to see the most has already bolted off. Mizore tracks Nozomi down in the all too familiar biology classroom. Our scene is established by cutting to random objects scattered idly around. You can't get more intimate than this. We're at the peak of the movie's emotional essence. Nozomi's eyes are flaking red from crying, but she still acts as her old self, smugly denying her outburst. Nozomi then starts cutting into Mizore, outwardly expressing her jealousy with a playful smile. It becomes clear here that Nozomi projected herself in the storybook too, but she perceived herself as Liz and Mizore as the blue bird. What makes this especially fucky is that during the storybook sequences, both Liz and the blue bird are played by the same voice actress. Her name's Miyu Honda, and she's actually a figure skater. This fact in tandem with the Decalcomania bird also being rendered of mirrored ink blots reinforces the idea that Mizore and Nozomi are one and the same. Each girl was playing both the roles of the prisoner and the captor.
私みぞれみたいにすごくないから私普通の人だから
But none of this matters to Mizore. She doesn't need Nozomi to prove herself. She unconditionally believes Nozomi is amazing. Music means nothing to Mizore in the face of how much she cares about Nozomi. All she asks of her is to be present, to listen to her. She shuts down Nozomi's defensive self-defeating interjections. Mizore twists the dagger into Nozomi, finally letting herself affirm her feelings. No more squandering, no more hoarding. Mizore goes in for the hug she's been wanting all this time.
大好きなハグ
It's the saddest, most pathetic hug I've seen. Nozomi darts her heels back. Mizore softly fumbles with how and where to press her hands. Nozomi returns the hug with limp obligation. But this is monumental. This is so necessary. Mizore relays herself even more clearly and truthfully than during her oboe solo. The two are finally united, basking in an orange glow away from the coldness. No melodrama, no contrivance, pure unbridled love.
のぞみの笑い声が好きのぞみの話し方が好きのぞみの足音が好きのぞみの髪が好きのぞみの全部みぞれの覚えが好き
Despite how cute and cathartic this scene is, I actually view it as a rejection scene. While I believe Mizore is genuinely in love with Nozomi, Nozomi merely loves Mizore as a close friend and as a musician. But what matters here is their transparency. Nozomi breaks the tension with unfeigned laughter, able to process and accept Mizore's feelings. She hugs her tighter. These girls have learnt how to be authentic with their needs and boundaries. Nozomi can stop comparing herself with Mizore and carve her own path. Mizore can find assurance in herself and let go of her tight grasp on Nozomi. By living their lives as their best selves, they can truly learn to be present for one another, and share a relationship not bogged down by possessiveness or conceit. Their love is no longer selfish. Now's the part of the video where I'm going to go into that embarrassing and hilarious and awful thing that I did. I lost a friend recently. I think I was in love with them, but I'm not exactly sure. I exhibited a lot of Mizore and Nozomi's worst traits in terms of how I interacted with them. I was obsessive, gloomy, and needy a lot of the time, on top of being dismissive, deceitful, and jealous. But I really did like this person. This movie reminded me of the ways this person possessed a wonderful ephemerality just from the smallest, dorkiest things they did. If that sounded like a creepy, idealistic, and toxic way to perceive someone, that's because it was. I wanted to free them from my possessive projection-y horniness, but I wasn't strong or humble enough like Mizore or Nozomi to reach an understanding, and I ended things in the worst way possible. We met up in a bar at like 3 AM after they had already left me earlier in the night. We started the night together, but I was being dismissive and drunk, so they went off with some other guy. As I strutted around town in impotent jealousy, I made acquaintances with a random guy of my own, and he followed me into the bar. To my daft surprise, he started making moves on me. I told him about the situation with my friend and how I was unable to be very emotionally present for him, but he was very understanding. He made out with me and fondled my little cock in the bar while the person I was in love with was downstairs. I'm a virgin, so this stuff doesn't happen to me very often. I hadn't gone this far before. It was consensual and I feel okay about it, but I don't even think I'm gay or bi. Regardless, I'm pretty dissociative and impulsive and quirky, so I'll take what I can get, Lamau. For me, it was a pretty ungendered, asexual experience. I didn't really feel any joy. I couldn't reciprocate anything for the person. I was as mobile and affectionate as a corpse, but they helped me feel like I was a person again for a few seconds. They were very kind to me. Their soap smelt alright. I found my friend afterwards, still with the guy they went off with at the start of the night. I asked the guy if I could talk to my friend for 5 minutes. Despite the prick I was being, he politely let us be. I told my friend that I was too greedy to respect their boundaries and that I didn't know how to sustain our friendship anymore. Inspired by Mizore, I selfishly gushed about all the things I loved about them like the stupid fuck I am. I told them that this is the end. I didn't tell them about the dude I just made out with though. I wanted to cry, I really felt like I needed to, but there was nothing. I was only thinking about my own skin the entire time. I booked an Uber and left, arriving back home at 5 AM. The Uber ride home cost me $40. You might be thinking right now, what the fuck are you talking about? I didn't want to hear that. Well, first off, I just wanted to vent, and second of all, I really wanted to illustrate why this movie means so much to me. I think there's a longevity and eternal truth in the depiction of the characters in this movie that's really special. Their simplicity allows their struggles to feel broad and relatable across so many contexts. Outside of that one experience I shared, there are so many past and present relationships in my life which remind me of Mizore and Nozomi's dysfunctional intimacy. Liz presents me with a relationship where two people can find a way forward and can find a way to be together, even through all the toxicity and the sadness. It feels like a resistance story that gives my own stories a happy ending, or a means of which I can improve my own current situation. But while this film has given me so much hope and joy and things to think about, as much as it's helped me heal, I guess, there's something wholly unfixable and painful to acknowledge about the people who produced it. Liz is a reminder of KyoAni's eternal triumph through the arson attack they sustained in 2019. This incident led to the death of 36 members of the studio. As much of a relief that Yamada herself wasn't at the studio on the day of the arson, the loss of so many others working in close stride to her on this film and in so many other productions is incomprehensible. I wanted to address it in more detail here just out of basic respect, and to remain critically aware and considerate of the people who make the work I care about. Nami Iwasaki was responsible for notable key animation in this film, rendering Mizore and Nozomi's hug scene in all its startling brilliance. She also animated the richest portions of Reina and Kumiko's mountain scene I discussed in the euphonium part of the review. Futoshi Nishia, the character designer and animation director I've mentioned throughout the video, died in the arson. He understood so clearly the direction the characters needed to be taken to explore who they were as people. I've provided a list of the other deceased KyoAni members who worked on Liz at the end of the video. I'm so grateful that they were each able to impart something so beautiful to the world, and something that means so much to me. Their work was about learning to connect with others, letting go of your cynicism, and engaging with people and pursuits that provide you with true happiness. They helped me find meaning in life when it has felt so empty. There's so many people who I want to thank who I can't properly thank. Production is a huge collaborative effort where some people's roles go underappreciated behind the scenes. But these people are just as important. There is beauty to be felt everywhere. People in planning who helped get everyone's work in tip-top shape. People in special effects who brought Liz's frigid dimensionality to life. My favourite shot in the film is an in-between frame of animation, a frame designed to paste the key notable frames together. The transience, the vulnerability of Mizore's face here is something so life-affirming, yet this entire scene's cut of animation remains uncredited, and the person who could have drawn this among KyoAni's pool of in-between animators could be dead. Everyone's presence was necessary for this to work. There's so much carnage and tragedy in the world to be able to mourn it all. I know it's a cliche to say, but it's true. To find any semblance of sanity, all we can do is care for the few people we do have, to hold them tight and dear and hope they'll be okay. But what can we do when coincidence is cruel? What do we do when the worst happens to the people we love? KyoAni seem to have found an answer. Tatsuya Ishihara and Yamada Naoko have gone on to make some of the best work they have ever produced. Tatsuya Ishihara was required to finish production on Dragon Maid Season 2, the first season of which was directed by Yasuhiro Takamoto, who died in the arson. Ishihara and his crew did Takamoto's legacy proud, injecting as much life and thoughtfulness that was present in the first season. Yamada actually departed from KyoAni to produce Heike Monogatari at Science Saru. It encapsulates all of her pain, but also her perseverance. It is a show about losing everything you have loved, but learning to stomach everything, and living with that pain with open arms, without forgetting it. While part of living with this is to commemorate the wondrous things the departed have accomplished, and to celebrate the bravery of the people who survived, part of it is also to completely acknowledge how awful it is, how much it didn't need to happen, and to find a healthy means to express all the confusion, the sadness, and hatred in our hearts. For as much money has been donated to help the cause, for as much new talent is hired, for as much empathy people from all over the world express for the situation, the people who died aren't coming back. What makes this situation even sadder is that several of the victims of the fire were animation students being trained in the studio. They were about to start their careers, were about to do wonderful things, but their mission statements were stillborn. It's a reminder that these people were people foremost. Human life of any sort is valuable, and their work or status in the industry should not be the sole basis on which we care about them, or identify who they are. These people had family and friends waiting for them to come back home. The arson will continue to affect the people intimately related to the staff and industry at large. I acknowledge that some of my attempts to pay respects to the studio may be futile in outcome, or possibly disrespectful or patronising to the parties affected. I hope my genuine love and respect for the people of Kyoto Animation has been made apparent through everything I've had to say today, but I'm sorry if I've treated the subject matter inappropriately or haphazardly. In many regards, this video has been pretty juvenile and silly in tone. I'm sorry if I'm overreaching with my observations, talking on the behalf of people who I've never even met, talking on the behalf of the people who are suffering, and talking on the behalf of the people who are dead. All I can hope for the loved ones of those who are lost is to continue to live their lives in a manner that is personally fulfilling and comfortable for them. To find a way to recover in spite of the irreplaceable presence of these people being ripped away from them, even if nothing will ever be the same again. Liz and the Bluebird concludes with Mizore and Nozomi finally being able to leave the school grounds, their prison. They're ready to hang out for some happy ice cream. Nozomi puts in the consideration to halt her strut and wait, whereas Mizore waddles restlessly with enthusiasm to catch up. Through the subtlest adjustments of their movements, we are able to tell that they've adapted to each other's pace. This movie is about learning to develop unity. It is about the undying connections we can share with others, no matter the preconceived distance. It's proven through Mizore and Nozomi's unorthodox dynamic, rendered in the most precise and humanistic of animated movements. Their adorable interactions are what I cherish and relate to the most within this film, emulating the moments of transcendental joy I've shared with my own friends and family. Yamada's intuitive direction accentuates the tangibility of communication. Through the interplay of sound and scene, the distant yet shared origin of decalcomania blots, and the tale of Liz letting her bird fly freely. Maintaining unity isn't easy. It requires honesty and patience, as well as empathy. There is a quiet writhing agony when the love between our girls breaks down. Mizore and Nozomi have to live independently from now on, but it makes their bond all the more strong, more genuine, more loving than ever before. They're two ink blots intermingling with one another. They're two birds flying side by side. They're free from their self-imposed cages. They're joint.